I was sitting in a waiting room outside a courtroom on the third floor of the Maricopa County Courthouse when my daughter sat down beside me, put her hand on mine, and said, "Dad, I need you to trust me today. Whatever happens in there, just trust me." I was 63 years old. I had worked 37 years in civil engineering. I had poured concrete foundations for schools, hospitals, and overpasses across the state of Arizona. I had built things meant to last 100 years. And now I was sitting in a courthouse waiting room in a suit I had not worn since my youngest nephew's wedding, about to watch everything I had built with my own hands get divided in half by a judge I had never met. I told my daughter I trusted her. I meant it. She was the only person left I could say that about without hesitation. Her name is Caroline. She was 29 at the time. She had her mother's dark eyes and her grandfather's stubbornness, and she worked as a forensic accountant for a firm downtown. I remember when she told me she wanted to study accounting, I had laughed a little. "You sure?" I said. "Numbers all day?" She looked at me the way only Caroline could and said, "Numbers don't lie, Dad. That's exactly why I like them." I thought about that a lot in the months that followed. My wife and I had been married for 31 years. We met when I was 32 and she was 28 at a barbecue hosted by a mutual friend on the east side of Phoenix. She was funny and confident, and she laughed at everything I said even when I was not particularly funny. We were married 8 months later in a small ceremony in Sedona. Caroline was born 2 years after that, and then our son Michael came along 3 years after Caroline. For a long time it was a good marriage. I will not pretend it was perfect. I worked too much. She wanted more vacations, more dinners out, a bigger house in a better neighborhood. I gave her those things over time, one by one, because that was how I was raised. You work, you provide, you build. My father built a hardware store from nothing. His father had built a farmhouse in New Mexico with his own hands. Building things was the only language I really knew. My wife handled the finances. This was a decision we had made early on, and I had never questioned it. She had a head for budgeting, or so I believed. She managed the checking accounts, the credit cards, the household bills. I made the money, and she managed it. That was our arrangement for 22 years. I signed tax returns without reading them carefully. I trusted the summary she gave me. That was my mistake. That was the foundational mistake on which everything else was built. I did not know it yet, but I would eventually learn that over the span of 7 years, my wife had moved money. Not carelessly, not impulsively, methodically, deliberately. The way you move money when you have been planning something for a very long time. She opened accounts I did not know existed. She transferred money in amounts small enough not to trigger alerts. She took out a home equity line of credit using our house as collateral and drew it down to near zero. She opened 2 credit cards in both our names and maxed them without my knowledge. She moved $280,000 out of our joint retirement account over a period of 7 years, redirecting it to an account held in her name only at a different bank. $280,000. The money I had put aside for the last decade of my working life. Gone. And I had no idea. I found out the way most men find out about things they should have known years earlier. Accidentally. It was a Tuesday in February, about 2 years before the courthouse. I had taken the afternoon off because I had a dentist appointment that ran long and it did not make sense to drive back to the office. I was at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my laptop, looking up parts for a truck restoration project I was doing in the garage. I needed a credit card number for an online order, and the card I usually used was in my other jacket. My wife was out. I went to the drawer in the kitchen where we kept a folder of financial documents, just to grab a card number. I found the statement for a credit card I had never seen before. My name was on it. Her name was on it. The balance was $43,000. I stood in that kitchen for a long time. The coffee went cold. I could hear the refrigerator hum and the neighbor's dog barking somewhere down the street, and I just stood there holding that statement like it was written in a language I was only beginning to understand. I did not confront her that night. I am not sure why. Maybe I was not ready. Maybe part of me already knew that once I asked the question out loud, the answer was going to change everything, and I was not sure I could handle that yet. I put the statement back in the folder. I went out to the garage and I sat in the truck I was restoring and I stared at the wall for an hour. The next morning, I called Caroline. I did not tell her everything. I told her I had found a credit card statement I did not recognize and I was confused about some of our finances. I asked her, as casually as I could manage, if she would mind taking a look at some documents with me sometime. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Dad, how soon can you meet me?" We met for lunch that Saturday. I brought the folder. She sat across from me at a diner booth and she went through every document slowly, and her expression did not change much, but I had known Caroline her entire life and I could see the tension working its way into her jaw, the way it did when she was concentrating on something serious. She asked me what accounts I knew about. I listed them. She asked me the name of our bank, the brokerage firm, the financial advisor we used. She asked me when I had last personally verified the balance of our retirement account. I told her I had not verified it myself in several years. My wife handled that. Caroline set down the folder and folded her hands on the table. She looked at me and said, "Dad, I'm going to need you to give me some time. And I need you to not say anything at home yet." I asked her what she had found. She said, "I don't know the full picture yet. But what I'm seeing here doesn't add up. Let me do what I do." I nodded. I trusted her. I went home and I sat across the dinner table from my wife that evening and I talked about the weather and the neighbor's new fence and I did not say a word about the folder. That was the beginning of what I can only describe as the longest 22 months of my life. Caroline did not call me every week with updates. She called me when she had something. She filed requests for documents. She pulled records. She used every professional tool available to her, and some she accessed through colleagues she trusted. She told me later that she had started to understand the full scope of it within the first 3 months, but she wanted documentation. Not suspicion, not instinct, documentation. She built a file. The file grew. Meanwhile, I lived in my house and I ate dinner with my wife and I slept in my bed and I went to work and I came home. I have been asked since how I managed that, and honestly, I cannot fully explain it. I suppose I had spent 37 years learning how to focus on the task in front of me and set aside everything else until the right moment. I was building something. I just could not show anyone the blueprints yet. 13 months after that Tuesday in February, my wife served me with divorce papers. I remember the process server knocked on the door on a Thursday evening. My wife was standing in the kitchen. She did not seem surprised. When I looked at her after the man had gone, she met my eyes and said, "Walter, this hasn't been working for a long time. You know that?" I said, "I know." She said, "I'm going to need you to move out by the end of the month." I said I was not moving out of my own house. She said her attorney had already filed for interim possession. She said it very calmly, like she had rehearsed it, like she had been planning this particular conversation for a very long time. I thought of something Caroline had told me months earlier. She had said, "Dad, this didn't happen by accident. Somebody sat down and made a plan." This took years. The divorce proceedings were not fast. Nothing about the legal system is fast. We went through mediation first, which accomplished nothing, because her attorney showed up with a financial picture of our marriage that was so different from reality that I genuinely did not recognize it. According to their documents, we had almost nothing. Our retirement accounts were modest. Our equity was minimal. Our debts were substantial. It was a version of our finances that had been carefully constructed to look like the natural result of 31 years of ordinary married life. I left mediation that day feeling something I had not felt in a long time. Not anger, not sadness. Something colder than both of those. I called Caroline from the parking garage. She answered on the first ring. I said, "Their documents don't match anything we found." She said, "I know. I saw what they filed. Dad, we're ready." I asked her what she meant. She said, "We've been ready for 6 months. I was waiting to see what they brought to mediation. Now I know exactly what we're dealing with." I asked her if she was sure. She said, "Dad, I'm a forensic accountant. Finding hidden money is what I do for a living. I've been doing it to my own family for almost 2 years, I'm sure." The trial was set for a Tuesday in April. My attorney was a former district judge named Harold, 70 years old, slow-moving, sharp as a blade. He had reviewed everything Caroline had compiled, and he had said very little during that meeting, which I had come to understand meant he was impressed. The morning of the trial, Caroline drove me to the courthouse. She was wearing a gray blazer, and she had her laptop bag over her shoulder and a large accordion folder under her arm. She had not slept much the previous night, I could tell, but she was steady. She had always been steady. Outside the courtroom, she took my hand and said, "Trust me." We went in. The courtroom was wood-paneled and smelled faintly of old carpet. The judge was a woman in her 50s, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. My wife was sitting at the other table in a blouse I recognized from our last anniversary dinner. Her attorney was a man in an expensive suit who specialized in high-asset divorce and who clearly believed he had already won. The opening statements were unremarkable. Her attorney painted a picture of a woman who had sacrificed her career for a husband who was emotionally absent, who had managed a household on a tight budget for 3 decades, and who was now entitled to an equitable share of what little remained. He was smooth. He was practiced. He made it sound entirely reasonable. My attorney kept his opening statement brief. He said the court would hear evidence that significantly contradicted the financial picture presented by the petitioner. He said the court would hear from an expert witness. He said he believed the judge would find the evidence compelling. The other attorney barely reacted. He had seen 100 divorce cases. He was not worried. The first hour of testimony covered our standard marital history. Length of marriage, living arrangements, work history, property. My wife answered every question from her attorney with the practiced patience of someone who had done a rehearsal. She was calm. She was sympathetic. She described a marriage in which she had given everything and received very little in return. She described managing an entire household alone while I worked. She described feeling invisible. She described a man who provided financially but was never really present. Some of it was not entirely untrue. That was the hardest part to sit through. When Harold stood up for cross-examination, he moved slowly to the podium and set down a single sheet of paper. He looked up at my wife and said, in the same tone a man might use to ask about the weather, "Mrs. Reeves, are you familiar with a savings account held at Southwestern Community Bank? Account number ending in 7,741? There was a pause. "I'm not sure," she said. Harold said, "Let me help." The account was opened in March of 2017. The primary account holder is listed as yourself. The account currently holds approximately $186,000. He set another page on the podium. "Do you remember now?" Her attorney objected. The judge sustained nothing. She looked at my wife and said, "The witness will answer the question." My wife said, "I may have opened a personal savings account at some point." Harold nodded slowly. "And are you familiar with a second account at the same institution, account number ending in 3,392, opened in your name in September of 2018, currently holding approximately $94,000. The courtroom was very quiet. "I would need to consult my records," she said. Harold said, "Of course." He returned to the table, and Harold then turned to the judge. "Your Honor, at this time the respondent would like to call an expert witness." Caroline stood up. I had not realized until that moment how much the room would change when she walked to the stand. She was my daughter. I had watched her learn to ride a bike in our driveway. I had watched her graduate twice. And now I watched her sit in a witness chair in a court of law and place her hands flat on the railing in front of her, steady and calm, and I felt something tighten in my chest that I did not have a name for. Harold asked her to state her qualifications. She did. Forensic accountant, licensed CPA, 7 years of professional experience, expert witness in 4 prior cases. The other attorney objected to her testimony on the basis of conflict of interest. The judge overruled. Expert qualifications were expert qualifications. Harold asked her to describe what she had found. Caroline opened the accordion folder. She testified for 40 minutes. She was methodical and clear, and she explained every number in language that required no financial background to understand. She traced the movement of money from our joint retirement account to the hidden savings account, transfer by transfer, over a period of 7 years. She documented the home equity line of credit and showed where the funds had gone. She produced records of the 2 credit cards opened in both our names, the debt run up, and the lack of any corresponding household expenditure that could account for it. She showed the gap between the financial picture presented by the opposing attorney and the financial reality she had reconstructed from bank records, tax filings, and transaction histories. $283,000. That was the total she had traced. $283,000 removed from our shared financial life and redirected over 7 years with deliberate and systematic care. Halfway through her testimony, my wife leaned over to her attorney and whispered something. He whispered back. She whispered again, more urgently, and her voice was tight enough that I could hear the edge of it from where I was sitting. Harold asked Caroline, "In your professional opinion, do the financial patterns you identified indicate intentional concealment?" Caroline said, "Yes. The pattern is inconsistent with accidental omission or administrative error. The timing of transfers, the account structure, and the amounts moved are consistent with deliberate, long-term financial concealment." Harold said, "And how long do you estimate this pattern of activity was in place?" Caroline said, "Based on the earliest traceable transfer, approximately 7 years." The other attorney crossed his arms. He had stopped taking notes. Harold then asked the judge to enter 47 exhibits into evidence. All 47 were documents Caroline had compiled. The judge reviewed the index. She looked at the opposing table. She said, "Counsel, do you wish to respond to this evidence?" The other attorney requested a brief recess. The judge granted 10 minutes. My wife and her attorney went into the hallway. I sat at the table with Harold, who poured himself a glass of water from the pitcher in front of us and said nothing. Caroline came and sat beside me. She put her hand on my arm. I said, "Did you know it would be this much?" She said, "I knew it was bad, Dad. I knew from pretty early on." I asked why she had not told me the full amount. She said, "Because I needed you to be able to sit across from her at dinner every night without giving anything away. If you'd known the real number, I wasn't sure you could do that." She was right. I would not have been able to do that. When we returned from recess, the opposing attorney stood and said his client wished to address the court regarding the exhibits entered into evidence. The judge said she would hear it. My wife stood up. She looked at the judge, not at me. She said that she had made some financial decisions over the years that she acknowledged were not fully transparent. She said she had been frightened about the future. She said she had not intended to conceal anything, only to protect herself. The judge let her finish. Then the judge said, in a voice that was entirely without warmth, "The court takes a dim view of the characterization of systematic financial concealment over 7 years as a protective measure. We will recess for the afternoon. Tomorrow morning we will discuss the ramifications for the division of assets and whether this court will be making a referral." A referral. I did not fully understand what that meant until Harold explained it to me in the parking garage. A referral meant the judge was considering sending the financial records to the county attorney's office. It meant the deliberate concealment of marital assets, combined with fraudulent credit applications made in both names, could constitute criminal charges. Wire fraud, bank fraud, depending on how aggressively the county attorney chose to pursue it. I sat in the passenger seat of Harold's car for a moment and let that settle. I said, "She could be charged." Harold said, "She is very likely going to be charged." The next morning, before the session resumed, the opposing attorney approached Harold with a proposal. My wife was prepared to stipulate to the full $283,000 as concealed marital assets, to withdraw all claims to the family home, to accept responsibility for the credit card debt accrued in both names, and to waive any claim to spousal support in exchange for Harold agreeing not to advocate for a criminal referral from the bench. Harold brought it to me. He said the decision was entirely mine. I thought about it for a long time, standing in that hallway, looking at the courtroom door. Then I thought about the Tuesday in February when I stood in my kitchen holding a credit card statement I had never seen before. I thought about 22 months of sitting across a dinner table and saying nothing. I thought about 37 years of working and trusting and building. I said, no deal. Harold nodded like he had expected that answer. The judge made the referral. 6 months later, my wife was indicted on 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of bank fraud. Her attorney negotiated a plea agreement. She was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution. I have been asked how I feel about that. It is not a simple question. 31 years is a long time. There are things from those years I would not trade. There are mornings we had, early on, before any of this, that I still think about. I do not think hating her would help me. But I also do not feel guilty about the referral. What she did was not impulsive. It was not a moment of weakness or fear. It was a plan. Somebody sat down and made a plan, and she executed that plan for 7 years, and she looked me in the eye every single day while she did it. The house was awarded to me in the final decree. The retirement account was ordered fully restored from her assets, to the extent possible. Between the civil judgment and the restitution order, I recovered approximately $241,000. Not everything, but most of it. Michael, my son, took it hard. He and his mother were close, and it took him a long time to understand the full picture. He did not speak to me for almost 8 months. That was its own kind of grief, separate and quiet. He came around eventually. We had a long conversation on his back porch last spring. He said he wished things had been different. I said I did too. We left it there for the time being. Some things take longer to rebuild than others. Caroline I see every Sunday. She comes for dinner and we sit on the back patio and we talk about whatever we feel like talking about, and sometimes we don't talk about much at all. I never fully thanked her in a way that felt adequate. I am not sure there are words for what she did. She spent nearly 2 years of her life quietly and carefully building a case to protect her father, without telling me how bad it was, without alarming me, without flinching. She is 31 now. She is remarkable in a way I take no credit for whatsoever. I am 63 years old. I have a house I own outright. I have a retirement account that is not what it once was, but is recovering. I have a daughter who calls me every Thursday morning on her way to work just to check in. I have a truck in the garage I am still restoring, and most evenings I go out there for an hour or 2 and work on it, and the garage smells like motor oil and metal, and it is quiet, and I am all right. I think about something Caroline said to me, years ago now, back in that diner booth when she first looked through the folder. She set down the documents and she said, "Numbers don't lie, Dad." She said it almost to herself, like a reminder, like something she had learned a long time ago and believed completely. She was right then. She was right in that courtroom. She has been right every single time. Here is what I will tell you. If you are a man of a certain age, sitting across a dinner table from someone you have trusted completely, feeling a vague unease you cannot quite name, trust that feeling. Look at the numbers yourself. Not because you believe the worst of the person you married, but because love is not the same as blindness, and protecting yourself is not the same as doubting someone. Ask the questions. Open the accounts. Read the statements. I built a career teaching other people to check their foundations before they built on them. A foundation looks solid right up until it is not, and by the time you notice the crack, the structure above it is already compromised. I should have known better. I am an engineer. Checking the foundation is the first thing you do. I know that now, and I am still here.